Yeah, I think Kieran raises a great question. Why the Popular Front? If the point was to the idea, the theory behind the Popular Front is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. If you get the socialists and the communists and the anarchists and the liberal capitalists and all these people all together, they'll make up a greater than the sum of their parts, and they'll be able to fight fascism better. But when all those disparate groups have opposing interests, or not all of them, but at least the two main poles. You got the capitalists, the so-called liberal capitalists on one side, and all the workers' organizations on the other, pulling in completely different directions. Then you don't have a force greater than the sum of its parts. You have a neutralization of all that potential force. And as they say, a spoonful of tar can ruin a barrel full of honey. And in the barrel of honey of the workers' organizations, you put this spoonful of tar. It wrecked the whole thing, frankly. So why not a united front of the workers' organizations to fight using the working class methods of struggle, which I described earlier, against the fascists? Why introduce this alien force? Now the reason is, of course, that we've been told. The reason people fell for this, we've been told for decades and decades and decades that, this is how things are. This is the sort of government we have. This is the kind of military structure we have. This is the kind of way that we wage war. But in a revolution, it's everything's turned upside down. And like I said, what was required was a revolutionary war, and not trying to replicate, not trying to fight. Like you said, you can't fight capitalism with capitalism. And we saw the examples of that in Italy and Germany and Austria and Spain, ultimately, that the so-called methods of the democracies don't work. They didn't work, and the working class paid for it. Just a couple quick points. Two is just to recommend a couple of movies to people that are kind of deal with some of these questions. Of course, the main movie in relation to Spain would be Land and Freedom, really good movie by Ken Loach, which I think people should check out. But also the movie 1900 by Bertolucci about the Italian Revolution. You see these stages, this process, the revolutionary process, the moment when the workers and the peasants and the socialists and Trotskyists and the anarchists and everybody rise up and they've got power in their hands and they don't know what to do with it. So they go back home and they turn in their guns, and then it's really tragic, and then the final line practically of the movie is the boss is back, literally, and that opportunity was wasted. And of course then we had to live through World War II as a result of that failure. So 1900 by Bertolucci, very cool movie, deals with a lot of these issues. And then just finally, if the Popular Front had won, again, what would have changed? You still would have had capitalists, you still would have had landlords, and the people just weren't willing to fight for that. And that's, I think, a really big reason for it. And just one last anecdote. Is in another movie, I guess, have you guys seen Pan's Labyrinth? That movie deals with this period of the post-Spanish Revolution. And we're told in the United States that D-Day took place because we had to fight fascism. And all these brave American farm boys went and risked their lives and died by droves in order to fight fascism. But if they were really fighting fascism and not trying to stop the advance of the Soviet Union, which is the real goal in my opinion, why didn't, after they got into Normandy, why didn't they head west down into Spain? Why did they leave fascism in power for decades after that if they were fighting fascism? That's just another anecdote. Well, just briefly on the tasks in Spain versus in the U.S. versus Spain, I think what are the similarities? I think it's just very clear here. In Spain, because it was 70% peasant country, although there were really important industrial centers and a strong working class in certain areas, and although millions of the rural workers were agricultural laborers, they weren't real peasants. They didn't own any land whatsoever at all. So they had more of a working class almost psychology in some ways, even though they lived in rural areas. In this country, it's 100% clear what the tasks are. There's no question. Do we have to have a kinder, gentler democracy in the United States? That argument, carried a little weight in Spain, where you had a monarchy up until 1931. People could say, okay, well, the next stage now must be democracy, like in France or something like that. In this country, we have the most perfect democracy that, as they say, money can buy already. So it's clear that the tasks here are socialist tasks. That is, we see the crisis of the system itself. We have the overwhelming majority of the United States are working class people, whether you work in a factory or you work at a call center or you work at, we're all workers. We sell our labor power for a wage to a capitalist. We don't live off stock actions or government bailouts. And it's clear what those tasks are. And I would say, in my opinion, that what we need is to develop that revolutionary leadership in advance, not a party above the class by any means, but part of the class. Anybody who's read the Communist Manifesto, which if you haven't read it, you should at least read so you can at least critique it from your own perspective if you don't agree with it, understands that what's argued for in there is that the communists be the most advanced sector of the working class, not something separate or apart or alien from it. And that's what I think we need to be building here. Obviously building ties with the working class in the trade unions, with unorganized workers, obviously, as well, immigrant workers. I think that's a really important movement everybody should be involved in. But you can see the bubbling up, the simmering discontent in this country, more and more coming to the surface. And I believe it will be sooner rather than later that we will have huge opportunities in this country. And the more we prepare now, the better prepared we'll be in order to take advantage of that situation. And so that people 70 years from now, if human society even can survive that long under capitalism, they don't have a meeting at some similar bookstore talking about, what not to do in the American Revolution in the future. So,
thank you all very much for coming. And we would all be happy to stay around and continue our discussion. There is a list of books on the back of the handout that I gave you, but it's only a partial list of stuff I pulled off of my bookshelf. There are a lot of great books over there on the table as well that Mayday is interested in selling you. And thank you again also for your questions and your time.